Hello, how have you been? I'm Ricardo Brito, I'm a Brazilian professor. I got my PhD in business management at USP, and I coordinate the program Strategy and Marketing for Emerging Countries offered by IBS and the Universidade Paulista, Paulista University. Both institutions are together offering these international programs. First of all, of course, thank you very much for joining us for this chat. The purpose of this meeting is to discuss how companies from everywhere can prepare themselves to face periods of economic turbulence. As you all know, the economies in most emerging countries are not performing well this year and the previous one. China's stock market is driving investors crazy. It lost 30% of its value in the last year. India's economy is slowing down. News from Brazil and Russia has been very, very far from good. And at the same time, economically developed countries like the US, Germany, Europe, etc., are not performing well either. European countries are still trying to leave the worst days of their crisis behind. And even the US, while officially growing again, is facing trouble in adapting to this new level of exchange rates, which affect its exports of products and services, along with other problems in its economy. I also believe that the election of Donald Trump is somehow connected to these difficulties, but it's another issue. We will not talk about this today. So let's start talking about the current global economic scenario, trying to understand together what is happening with the global economy, and especially what are the impacts it has over emerging countries, okay? Then I will talk about business strategies in the context of crisis, not utilizing just theory, but also practical examples, which are the adaptations in the strategies that a company shall use to be able to cope during a crisis, to grow during a crisis, to overcome the crisis. I will make an initial presentation of about 15 minutes, and then we'll go to a Q&A session, a question and answer session, with the help of Mr. Julio, who is here beside me. The subjects we will be discussing today, are among the topics of a short-term program that we run every January, July, and August. January 2 weeks, July and August 3 weeks programs called Strategy Marketing for Emerging Countries, and also we have another new program called Agribusiness in Brazil, short-term programs that we will talk about them later. Okay, all right. Several colleagues have already sent their questions, but if you want to enter your questions as well, just log on the YouTube chat by clicking on the right side of your screen, okay? You need a Gmail account for doing so. And send your question, your contribution, your opinion, and please do not forget, if you want a certificate for attending this chat, some people need, do not forget to write your full name in the chat in order to confirm your presence, okay? So let's get started. Let me tell you a very, very important thing. Fear is not a good advisor. Those who in periods of crisis are driven by fear, they are scared of doing something, will make the situation of the company they work for even worse. And they will also jeopardize their career. On the contrary, we need to pull our strengths and fight. We need to seek for new ideas, reach new ways, just as you are doing right now, talking about how to do business in the context of crisis. It's important to bear in mind that a lot of companies grow during a crisis. A lot of professionals will stand out for having new ideas, for launching new actions, and their careers will prosper during the crisis. It's true, what I want is to help you to be one of these professionals. My intention is that your company, based perhaps in some of the suggestions we will be discussing here, your company be able to grow during a crisis. That's my idea. Please have a look on the information I'm showing in the screen right now. These are the most recent forecasts from the IMF, International Monetary Fund, about world economic growth in these and the coming years. See that the advanced economies in the world, led by the United States, Germany, and other Western countries, will grow little, but they will grow this year. They will grow even a little bit more than they have grown in the last 2 years at a rate of 2% a year. Some people say it's not enough, but they will grow. And at the same time, emerging countries in general will suffer a little, and it's important you understand why. When there was the last big crisis, 2008, 2009, that affected the financial system of rich countries, there was a capital migration from developed countries to poor countries. Now, economies are resuming now, these capitals are returning to rich countries. Due to this, the dollar has regained its value against all world's currencies, and with less capitals in the emerging countries, it's natural. Economic development will be reduced. There is no way to escape from this, no way. See now what is happening in the emerging countries' economy, please. Those emerging countries' economies that grew strongly in 2010, 2011, stopped growing so fast by 2013, 2014, growing just about 4 to 5% in 2015. And the growth rate reduced even more last year to around somewhere in 4%. And the IMF expectation for this year and to the next year is just a slightly recover, with only growing a little bit more in 2018 at the rate of 5%. And of course, it's an average. Unfortunately, Brazilian economy, I'm here in Brazil now, Brazilian economy is pushing down this average. Together with the Russian economy, which is also suffering a lot, we know that political decisions of the governments influence the economic performance. And in each of these countries, there were mistakes that took their economy to slightly better or slightly worse in the current global scenario. And somehow that reminds me the famous opening of the Tolstoy book, the book Anna Karenina. I don't know if you ever heard of this book, Anna Karenina from Tolstoy. In this wonderful book, the author says that happy families are all alike, while every unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. In the economy, it's more or less the same. When things go well, everybody's happy, all governments are geniuses, markets are well organized, families are buying and saving in the right proportion. But when the economy fails, when the economy shrinks, the analysts will look closer and realize that each country is doing something different, some different nonsense action, and the crisis will be more or less intense in each region or each country for a different reason. Here in Brazil, it was a major political instability. In Russia, similar issues took place, it's true, increased, of course, by a stronger dependence on the country on oil exports, similar to what happens in Venezuela, here in Latin America. China, you know, is in a transitory period from a state-controlled economy for a more open, market-driven economy, from an commodity industrial economy to a service-based economy. And these transitions are not easy to deal with. And finally, every country has a story to tell when explaining why things are getting worse. But the fact is that the world's not going to be in a collapse. Please take a look in the table I'm showing to you right now. The global economy grew more or less 3.4% last year, which is more than the world grew in the previous one. It was led by emerging countries that may grow around 4 to 5% in 2016, almost the double of the developed countries' growth rate, which may be around 2%. So My dear friends, if someone was waiting for the end of the war this year, if someone was betting on a total collapse of the economy, it will be necessary to wait a little bit longer because the world's economy is going pretty well, besides the problems in some economic aspects. And my suggestion to every manager is to work hard, dry the tears, and come back to work. Now, I will give some suggestions. I'm going to talk to you about what companies from all over the world, with some highlights to companies from emerging countries, what companies are doing in the face of this adverse scenario. And I'm going to start talking about the perspectives of internationalization of your business. You know the dollar is stronger in comparison to other currencies. You already know that. The emerging countries' economy is getting slower, while the developed countries is somehow recovering, and you already know that too. Well, what are you waiting for to make concrete exporting plans? It's for the agribusiness, for the industry, for tangible goods, for industrial products, for services, whatever you produce. This slide I'm presenting you now indicates that Brazil had in last year the biggest amount of foreign direct investment in capital here since 2007. The cross-border flow of capitals rose by 36% last year. There are also great news for exporters worldwide. I know that international trades in general is suffering at this moment, but just as an example, US imports of meat increased more than 80%. And it's not only agricultural goods that are now having more appeal in the American market. Imports in the automobile sector there grew 40%. Aircraft imports increased by more than 60%. It means that with, while some are crying, there are people working and making money out there. I know that not all business segments can simply go international overnight, and truth to be told, companies cannot be waiting for currency fluctuations to decide if they are going to be internationalized or not. Integrating to global business is a task that might be part of the company's routine. And you know who is you that is with us today. You must have in mind, you should prepare yourself, you should prepare your career to be a manager with global perspective. You should develop abilities to conduct business in a global scale. If not, if you don't do that, your career will be stuck. But we can talk later about how you might do that, okay? Now, I will talk about strategic actions. We'll discuss strategy now to overcome the crisis, to overcome the problems of the crisis. And my first suggestion, and prepare because it's a painful suggestion, is downsizing your company. All right? Downsizing means to reduce the company's operation, a strategy that maintains the main activities of the organization in operation, but with widespread cost reduction, reducing the company size as a whole. All right? An option to downsize with similar effects on spending, but with very different results under the managerial point of view, is not downsizing but downscoping. Downscoping means making specific, located spending cuts, usually in the inactive business units, not central to the company's business scope, right? Let me give you an example that it's easier for you to understand. Microsoft recently decided to implement this plan, a plan like this, downscoping, reducing the number of employees in its telephone area, allowing the company to focus on the areas of software, especially the Windows suite. Both downsizing and downscoping, they both promote cuts in the company's expenses, but they strongly affect revenue and led to the difficult reality of cutting jobs precisely when the economy is in a bad shape. And believe me, it's one of the worst decisions a manager must take in his or her life. But there are some options that you should consider before taking some more drastic measures. And these options are called by strategic alliances. They reduce costs, promoting cost sharing between rival companies. I'll give you some examples to make it easier for me to explain it here. There are three main types of strategic alliance. The first one is called synergistic. It's called synergistic because it aims to explore what? Synergies between competitors, seeking, let's say, scope economies as an option to the loss of scale economies provoked by the crisis. A recent example of this strategy was a joint venture between a global company called Ambev and Whirlpool. Ambev is a global company with headquarters in Europe, while Whirlpool is an American company. Together, they created a company to explore the market of what they call B-blend, to develop homemade drink markets in Latin America. B-blend is a kind of appliance used for making drinks at home, like beverages in general. In isolation, neither company could thrive in this market, but together, joining their force, their chance of success is higher, all right? Another strategic alliance option goes by the popular name of franchising. This is a spectacular way to attract partners and to attract investors. Today, they dominate retail worldwide. Is your company lacking resources to expand? Well, you can launch franchises and expand with capital that would have been used to boost your competitors. This was the case of this group of Mexican retailers, companies that overcame economic restriction, attracting investors. While the overall Mexican economy grew 2.6%, franchise companies increased their revenues 4 times more than this last year. But there is one form of an alliance that I would not want to leave out, especially because it can save your company in times of crisis. These alliances are called complementary alliances, okay? They look very much like the synergistic alliance that I explained just a few seconds ago, but in the case of complementary alliance, two or more firms exchange part of their operations. Again, I will give you an example. The BR Foods from Brazil, it's a company, BR Foods, and the Singapore foods industry from Singapore struggled for the food market in Asia. Both did the whole process, from production to distribution. It turns out that BR Foods is much stronger in the production side, while Singapore Foods is stronger in logistics, especially in Asia. While the alliance between them, BR Foods can devote themselves to production, leaving logistics to Singapore Foods, while Singapore Foods enter the partnership offering its structure and local logistics. Both gain with this. All right, got it? Okay. Okay, so far? Don't forget that at the end, we will have time for talking about this subject. Send your questions, send your opinion, your contribution to this debate through your chat, okay? Well, I'd like now to give some examples and suggestions of strategies to face the crisis, strategies for companies operating with a focus on differentiation, okay? Strategies for companies that offer greater quality products and services in general. crisis knocks the front door. Sales are weak. What must the manager looking to offer more sophisticated products? What you must think of doing in this case? My first suggestion is to perfect even more the quality of your products. And this is the first strategy being suggested here, the increased quality strategy. It means the organization finds new methods, new ways to better understand what their customers expect and to enhance their products. The result can be the containment of the loss of customers who would migrate to a more economical option, or it can allow in some cases the increase in price, helping to recover the lost margins by lower sales volume, for instance, okay? Another thing that you can think of to deal with the effects of the crisis is to invest in innovation. The innovation strategy aims to offer a product able to contain the stampede of customers seeking out lower cost competitors. It happens sometimes. And a specific form of innovation is through the provision of services, which brings us to the next strategy suggested here to combat the crisis. Unlike the above suggestions, increasing the services has an advantage for you. The cost and the time needed are much smaller than any other option, and you can still save some job positions within the company. All right? Moving forward here, the next strategy to face bad times in the economy is the improvement of the communication of value, okay? Let me explain it to you. Many customers stop buying the products of your company because they cannot see the benefits inherent in the products. And in time of crisis, this factor tends to magnify, right? And finally, the last strategy on which I'd like to address with you is the niche strategy, sub-segmentation strategy. To go faster, I'll give you right now an example. Myanmar is a country, a traditional food exporter to Europe and other countries. They may be doing great. However, crises, affect everyone. So last year, a Myanmar company called Shwe Panlaw. Shwe Panlaw became last year the first exporter of this Asian country, Myanmar, to be certified as organic by an international organization. And their goal was to reach a specific new market with greater purchasing power through a more healthy and conscious positioning. Got it? Very well. Given that we have no time left, I talked a lot today, I'm sorry for that. We reached the end of this presentation. I want to thank you again for being with us today. I know this topic is difficult, and I know that at the moment the economy is not out at their best, but hopefully these ideas and tips will help you to develop market strategies, a strategy aimed at both moments of economic change and moments of crisis. Now, I'd like to talk to you, I'd like to hear your questions. But before that, I was almost forgetting here, I'd like to share with you that IBS, in partnership with a very important Brazilian university, the Universidade Paulista University, UNIP, a university that with IBS is offering now scholarships for students from all over the world interested in to attend the program Strategy and Marketing for Emerging Countries. We have also another program called Agribusiness in Brazil. Both are short-term programs, full-time, very intensive in English. In January, it's 2 weeks. In the July and August, 3 weeks taught in English by Brazilian professors from USP and other great universities here. In São Paulo City, the program will approach business opportunities in emerging countries, marketing, innovation, the impact of globalization in emerging countries, questions about the country's infrastructure, case studies, and a lot of subjects that interest people like you who are interested in developing their professional careers, broadening their mindsets. So let's do this. The best 3 questions sent today will be waived for their enrollment fee. All right? I will show now some pictures of the program. We have some groups here in Brazil. They completed the program last year, enhanced their knowledge on managing in emerging countries. And please do not forget the deadline for applying for a scholarship is November 15. So don't miss the chance and send your application for us, okay? Now, I and Mr. Julio will read your questions, and you can keep sending your questions. Even in the case we don't have time to read your question here, all questions will be considered for the exemption of the enrollment fee, all right? Thank you very much. Let me start here. I will try to summarize some of the questions. Mr. Awan from New Zealand, he studies at the University of Auckland, asks, in terms of the economic recessions that currently exist across Latin American nations, as customers tend to move to be more price sensitive, would it be sensible for adapting a value proposition approach according to different customer segments as a means to utilize cost-conscious customers? Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Awan, for your outstanding question. What I think is that people overestimate the price sensitivity of customers in low-income countries, you know? They overestimate that. If you go to any country, you can pick the country you want. Among, I mean, the low-income countries, the emerging countries. You go to the most important markets, food, clothes, automobile, whatever you want. You will see that usually the market leader is not the company that offers its products at the lowest cost. Why is that? Because poor people, low-income families, they think a lot about how to spend their money, and they know that more important than a lower cost, they need to find out for high cost value proportions. You know what I mean? So what I'm trying to explain is that in many Latin American countries, as well in many other markets around the world, your perspective is not precisely what I can see. But as a matter of fact, you have a point here, a very important point. The more a company is able to understand the segments that compose a specific market, the company can create strategies to conquer each one of these markets. Markets are not conquered as a whole. Markets are conquered segment by segment. If you can propose a strategy that has a cost-benefit ratio, a high cost-benefit ratio, you certainly will gain this market. But for each segment, this ratio can be slightly different, okay? Thank you very much, Mr. Awan from New Zealand, for sending your question. I have now a question from Ms. Ann Kairu from Kenya. She says that youth unemployment is still high in Brazil, although measures have been taken to reduce unemployment rate. Many of the youth in Brazil have low-quality jobs where the turnover is high and employers are failing to invest in their workers. What is Brazil's strategy to curb this situation? Unfortunately, you have a point, Ms. M. Unfortunately, not only in Brazil, I believe since the last crisis in 2008, 2009, there has been this difficulty of including young people around the world into the labor market. And this will come with a tool in the next few years, because once you are postponing the entrance of young people in the labor market, and you are not investing properly in their education so they can enter later but at a higher level of preparation, which is usually the strategy that European countries use to cope with the unemployment rate among young people, you have a lost generation in your hands. You have a generation that at the end will have a limited contribution to offer to the society as a whole, all right? What they should be doing in Brazil and other countries, investing in education, keeping these people inside the schools, preparing them to offer more when they reach the labor market later, okay? That's my opinion. Thank you very much for sending your question. I have here now a question from Miss Anna from Scotland. She studies at the University of Glasgow. Statistics shows that half of the mergers, when a company took over another one, fail to deliver their value to the business. Today, the use of mergers and acquisitions is the main globalization strategies of many emerging countries, such as India and China. It's true. There are lots of greenfield operations in globalization, but usually major corporations from India and China use M&As, mergers and acquisitions, as a shortcut to access global markets. After the recession, companies from the BRICS emerging countries took over 26% of the previous year's deals between developed and developing countries. Can you please, she asks me, can you please compare the traditional strategies of company in developed countries with the strategies of emerging giants? Well, I believe the first and perhaps the most important difference between what we see in the globalization effort from developed countries and emerging countries strategies is that companies from developed countries can go by themselves. They have more resources, they have access to low-cost capital, they have more valued brands, so they can enter in global markets. They can go international using their own resources, opening their companies from zero, what we call greenfield operations. While companies from emerging countries, usually with less access to capitals, with less power of their brands, they usually adopt a more conservative strategy, which means merging with international companies, acquiring some international companies, so they access their markets, let's say, in a turnkey operation. It's everything ready to go, okay? But I believe there are other important differences. First of all, the most important characteristics of globalization for emerging countries is when they look for conquering markets abroad. While when developed company, when they go abroad, they usually are looking for resources. They are looking for productive plants, subsidiaries that contribute to the supply chain. So this difference means a lot in terms of what the company think of itself and what the company think of the globalization it's putting in place. Okay, Anna, thank you very much. Anna from Scotland, University of Glasgow. Thank you very much for being with us, and I hope seeing you in our programs. Okay, I have now a question. As a matter of fact, several questions from Mr. Chandra Karki. Mr. Chandra Karki from Nepal. One of the questions he sends is, what will be the strategies to cope with the global hunger and food security? Well, Mr. Chandra, you know that nowadays estimates points that the world capacity of producing food is about 90% of the potential demand. It means there is 10% of the population, or 10% of the total consumption, better explain this, 10% of the potential consumption is not being fulfilled by the production, by the capacity of delivering the food for the whole world. And if these recent trends of isolation, of neglecting the access of international markets for producers and consumers, if this current trend develops, we can see this situation even worse. In this context, what I think is that those who believe in the globalization as a tool to development, economic development, should stand up and defend their points of view, should promote the internationalization of the market, the access to different suppliers. Food security is a serious business. We gotta provide food for people who needs food. We are not talking about luxury cars. We are talking about something that people really need to keep their lives going on. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chandra, for sending your question. Oh gosh, I have several questions here. We will not have time to read off all of them. I will just read one more question that you sent in advance, and then we will try to answer the questions you are sending now and end this talk, all right? I have now a question from Mr. Dominique, Strathmore University in Kenya. How can an organization stress test their strategies? This is a very interesting question. Our discussion today is mostly about strategy, right? When a company thinks of a new strategy, it can be right, but it can be wrong too. If they devote all their resources, all their energies, all their markets to an idea that proves not being good, it can cost the company. So testing strategies is something very important for the long-term sustainability of the business. And the question is, how to do that? Well, there are several ways. You can try smaller actions, trying to anticipate what will be the reaction of your clients here and there. You can make some research, but what usually companies do is to pick one region, one country sometimes, and put in place the strategy in this country, in this region, and see what happens. If the strategy shows value, it's worth of it, they will replicate the strategy worldwide. If it's not, they will just cancel the operation there. They will lose money there, but they will save the company. But what happens usually is not these two extremes. What happens usually is the mid-term. They implement a strategy here, they learn, they perfect the strategy, and they go global with this new strategy, with a stronger, more robust strategy. perfected by the field experience they developed there. All right. So I have several other questions from UK, from South Africa, United States, Palestine, South Africa, Cameroon, Samoa. Oh gosh, I'm so sorry. I don't have time to answer all of them. You know that I have been written an article regarding to this subject, and in this article, I believe I can go deeper into some details. Perhaps it's a good idea to share with you this article if you are interested, okay? But now let's read the questions you have been sending now. Please, Julio, what is the name and the question, please?
Miss Amanda from Botswana is asking, how do the emerging countries maintain their professional investment when recession occurs in their respective countries?
Well, Amanda, when recession comes, everybody limits its expense. It's the essence of recession. A lack of confidence in the economy, people stop buying, stop investing, and the recession becomes even more serious. The solution is to invest. The solution is to buy. And companies, after a while, they got scared initially, but after a while, they realize if they don't invest, they don't grow. If they don't grow, they can die. You know that nowadays governments are investing a lot in trying to promote the economic development. About 1/4 of the governmental bonus of countries around the world are now offering negative interest rates. It means you get $100, whatever. 1 year later, you give back 99. All right? It means the government is paying you to invest, is paying you to help you to keep your activities going on. You got to understand that a recession is usually composed by two different aspects. There is the, how can I say, the essential structure of the economy that can be damaged by some reason, lack of investments, they lack resources, environmental issue, etc. But there is the confidence. If people are confident that the future can be better than the past, they will invest, they will resume their purchasing, and the economy can grow again. All right? Thank you, Miss Amanda from Botswana, for sending your questions. And I hope we can meet in the future in one of our programs down here. Okay? Thank you very much.
Miss Claudia from New Zealand. Hello, Professor Ricardo. You talk a lot about these strategies in the context of manufacturing industries, for example, meat or softwares. How do you see these strategies in working in a service industry?
Claudia, you got a point. It's true that I somehow choose more industrial companies to give some examples for you. But in general, let me say, it was just a lack of attention from my side. But the strategies that I mentioned are excellent to both industrial sectors, agribusiness, and services. Because you know, when we talk about, for instance, the strategic alliances, we can have strategic alliances in any sector you want. We can talk when we talk about improving the communication of value and so on and so on. If you analyze each one of the strategies that I mentioned here can be interesting for context of crisis for any kind of company you may want. Okay, there is this trend for us professors to give more examples of tangible goods because you know administration as a field of knowledge was born into the factories, was born into the supermarkets selling goods. But as a matter of fact, we have a greater percentage of the total income of a country composed by services than industrial or agricultural goods. It's a trend around the world. Okay, Claudia, thank you very much for sending your questions, and I hope seeing you soon. Okay, please, Julio.
Another question from Miss Claudia. If people are laid off in economic turbulence, how do we market to people who are behaving conservatively in the market?
I'm not sure if I agree with you with your point of view. I believe crisis can lead people to be more conservative, but I see a lot of examples of very innovative entrepreneurial attitude during periods of crisis. Because you know, in a period of crisis, customers, let's say, stop buying or slowing down their purchases, right? But they need to buy, and they are looking for a better cost-benefit ratio. So in a sense, they are more open to new options than they are when the economy is doing great. So I believe in the economic crisis context, we should review our points of view. When I was preparing this lecture, this presentation, this talk here, let's not say it's a lecture. I was checking out the literature of creating strategies. And you know what? Usually the literature talks about how to develop a marketing strategy or how to review a marketing strategy. But it's very rare finding someone discussing what to do when you have a company, a strategy, and the economy goes down or the economy changes. Adapting the strategy for context of crisis is a rare subject in the managerial field of knowledge. So I invite you, Claudia, and your other colleagues to join us in this debate. I have this article that I can share with you, and I hope you can contribute to this discussion and also contribute in your companies, discovering new ways to do business to prosper your business in a periods of economic difficulties. Okay, so thank you very much. We are running out of time. I was a little bit talkative today. I'm sorry for that. Again, I'm Professor Ricardo Brito from Brazil, coordinator of the program Strategy and Marketing for Emerging Countries, offered by IBS Americas and Paulista University here in Brazil, okay? And don't forget, if you want to get a scholarship for attending this program, you have until November 15, next week, is the deadline for applying for a scholarship, okay? Thank you very much. See you soon.